The end of the Babylonian exile marked a physical and psychological shift for ancient Jerusalem, moving a fractured society out of shadow. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1 states, "Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee." The command to arise, shine acts as a direct call to action, instructing the people to emerge from their captive state and physically reflect divine glory. The declaration that thy light is come symbolizes the arrival of enlightenment and the return of God's presence to the city. This restoration took shape through specific geopolitical leaders who administered the Persian province of Yehud Medinata. Gubernatorial figures managed the civic rebuilding, including Sheshbazzar around 538 BC, Zerubbabel in 520 BC, and Nehemiah returning in 445 BC. In parallel, the spiritual order was re-established by a line of high priests, starting with Joshua, son of Jehozadak. The record of these administrators indicates that the glory described in verse 1 found practical expression in the re-establishment of a functioning government in Jerusalem. Next, we examine Isaiah chapter 60, verse 2 states, "For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people. But the Lord shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee." The imagery of darkness covering the earth describes periods defined by intense global turmoil and spiritual blindness. The specific phrase, "gross darkness the people," identifies a depth of ignorance and sin that actively obscures divine truth from human populations. This timeline visualizes the first historical fulfillment of this darkness, the chaotic period prior to the Babylonian exile. A second era of darkness took hold in the centuries immediately preceding the ministry of Christ. A third, much longer epoch then stretched from the end of the 1st century AD all the way until the early 19th century. The final clause contrasts these long shadows by promising God actively intervenes to bring targeted light. Verse 2 maps out a recurring historical cycle where profound human ignorance persists until it is broken by highly specific, localized divine actions. This section addresses Isaiah chapter 60, verse 3 states, "And the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising." The assertion that Gentiles shall come to thy light details the specific drawing of non-Israelite nations toward the truth of God. The phrase, "kings to the brightness of thy rising," describes how influential foreign rulers are attracted to the divine wisdom placed upon this restored population. A clear historical trajectory emerged as various Gentile kings and Roman emperors converted to Christianity. These conversions redirected the power dynamics of the ancient world, bringing vast foreign wealth and political influence into alignment with Abrahamic traditions. Verse 3 predicts an outward expansion of Israel's spiritual authority, scaling from a localized religious restoration up to the highest levels of global government. The following passage explains. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 4 states, "Lift up thine eyes round about, and see, all they gather themselves together, they come to thee. Thy sons shall come from far, and thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side." The command to lift up thine eyes round about instructs the observer to physically look and witness the literal geopolitical fulfillment of these promises. It describes the phenomenon of distinct, scattered populations migrating from all directions to unite in a single location. The claim that thy sons shall come from far requires the literal return of the children of Israel, traveling from distant foreign lands back to their origin. Historically, this points to specific migration eras, including the first post-exile restoration and the gathering during the meridian of times. The historical record shows that both the first restoration and the meridian of times gatherings eventually lost momentum and collapsed. The promise that thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side indicates physical safety, care, and civic infrastructure required to support these massive returning populations. Verse 4 shifts the focus away from abstract spiritual conversion and focuses entirely on the immense logistical reality of a physical migration back to Jerusalem. We examine Isaiah chapter 60, verse 5, which states, "Then thou shalt see and flow together, and thine heart shall fear and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted unto thee, and the forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee. The phrase, thine heart shall fear, describes an intense emotional response, a feeling of being ruffled, agitated, and deeply excited by the sheer, overwhelming volume of arriving converts and monetary wealth. To flow together means establishing shared, centralized prosperity among the people gathering in the city. Looking at the ancient Septuagint translation clarifies how early readers understood the term abundance of the sea. The Septuagint renders it, the riches of the sea and of the nations and of the people will come over to thee. The forces of the Gentiles refers to the tangible strength, monetary riches, and physical resources of other nations being aggressively funneled into Zion. Verse 5 marks the critical tipping point where a spiritual gathering transforms into an overwhelming accumulation of material and economic power. Next, we examine Isaiah chapter 60, verse 6, which states, "The multitude of camels shall cover thee, the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, all they from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall shew forth the praises of the Lord." The multitude of camels and dromedaries act as literal indicators of vast trade caravans and nomadic tribute physically arriving in the city. By 34 AD, the temple in Jerusalem functioned as a central bank and a global marketplace, with its courts hosting constant international commerce. The complex facilitated high-value trade, drawing in precious metals, luxury goods, exotic clothing, and expensive incense. Money changers were a functional necessity in this system, converting diverse Roman currencies to the Tyrian shekel, which was the only accepted coinage for the temple tax. The historian Alfred Edersheim documented the staggering scale of this international market. This map visualizes Edersheim's findings, tracking 118 imported articles brought to Jerusalem from as far as India, Egypt, and Italy. Flavius Josephus confirms this, writing that the outer court was filled with traders, making the temple a literal marketplace. This massive trade hub experienced a tragic decline following the Roman destruction of the temple in 70 AD. The abstract poetic vision detailed by Isaiah ultimately manifested as the localized, concrete socio-economic reality of the first-century Jerusalem temple economy. This concludes our overview.